Only minimal screw-ups today, folks. I mean, it's pretty on brand though, right?
Not no screw-ups.
Not no screw-ups. And by on brand, let me correct myself. That's not the Trimark brand, that's the Danny brand. The Danny brand is just chock full of screw-ups. Well, happy Friday, everybody. I mean, honestly, when you do something so much, it's kind of hard, like, no matter how bad it is, to not be a little proud of your consistency. Like, I may have done a thing, but at least I'm doing it a lot. Happy Friday, everybody. Welcome to the... What?
You're consistent. We know what to expect.
And consistently devil interrupt my introductions to the show. I know that. So at least we have that. We'll always have that. Good Friday, everybody. My name is Danny Akatsuki with the Twitch Trimark Happy Hour. But Danny, isn't happy hour at like 4 p.m. on some days or 6 p.m.? It's happy hour sometime everywhere. What are we doing today? Happy Friday. It is 2 p.m. Eastern and what, 11 a.m.? No. Yeah, it's 11 a.m. Pacific. Quick, Jake, what time is it in UTC? What kind of analyst are you? Come on.
Something.
Come on. No, fail.
It ends in the 12.
It ends in something like that.
Isn't it 7? It's not 7:12 there?
I think it's 7.
I usually have a clock that has UTC around here somewhere because I've fancied my, well, with gotcha questions like that, I like to have the answer so that I can make.
I have it in my Max widget and thing on the side, and I didn't look. I forgot I'd done that. Yes, 7:12.
So I can make
now. Yeah.
So I can make Jake look even worse than he is.
Thanks, dude.
Volume 2 is today. If you joined us last week, we had Volume 1, Hacking Demystified. There's a lot to talk about when it comes to that, right? You can't boil the ocean with that kind of thing. And by the way, I'm super upset that I now use terms like boil the ocean.
It's just because you read Christina's blog post this morning, isn't it?
It's mostly that. But so help me God, if you ever hear me actually use the phrase "open the kimono," no, shoot me.
All right, I'm gonna write that one down. Hold on.
Shoot me dead.
I think Danny's trying to be more synergistic.
No.
I was gonna say we all need to start like using that term so it becomes like a buzzword that he then picks up and then starts using, without realizing it. We all have a plan here.
I always use 20 exclamation points when communicating with Danny.
All right, listen. If you know what? No, we have a guest. We have company today, and you're not going to derail me on things that I hate. Who is our guest anyway?
By the way, there's no echo coming from me, right? Because every time someone talks, I see my thing light up, but I have my thing going through my roadcaster, so I'm just making sure. Okay.
No echo for you, sir.
Good.
You want some?
Technology's actually working. Yeah, I can erase some echo here.
Who are you again? What do you do? Why are you here? That's disrespectful as shit. This is Hacking Dave, everybody.
I just thought this was just an open server I could join here.
He just found his way in. Sounds about right. The Mr. Dave Kennedy. AKA
thanks so much for having me on. Seriously, I look forward to it. A big fan of you folks and what you've been doing, and love to be on this podcast. And well, whatever is it not? It's not really a podcast, right? It's like a Twitch stream. So
funny you should ask.
Not anymore, really?
Yeah, is it a pod? Is it a pod? Is it Twitch? Is it a stream? Is it like what's the cool hip term nowadays? I don't know.
It's hybrid streaming.
Hybrid's a good word.
Okay.
Yes.
Right.
How markety of you, Sean? Hybrid.
Synergistic hybrid streaming. Coming to you live.
New paradigm, right?
From the interwebs.
Actually, no, funny you should mention that because technically it is a podcast because we now do the audio and upload it to Spotify. So, anybody listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts right now, welcome. Trimarksecurity.com for all your Active Directory, virtualization, purple teaming, and Azure AD services. Hey, look, I got all those from memory.
I thought you had that written down for sure.
No, I really don't. I spent a lot of my day like looking at that stuff. That's really all. I hear it in my sleep. I'm writing copy in my sleep. No, I wanted to have Dave on. So last week, to get to the point without me pontificating too much more, we talked. Dev and I, aka Bad Code, also with us on the stream. We were talking about different, obviously, topics to keep things fresh and things like that. And like, there are no shortage of them. But his idea was like, let's try and demystify hacking, right? Because like as I mentioned in the first episode of this series, have taken all of my cues from Swordfish. Highly
accurate, by the way. So good bottle to go off for. Yeah.
I was like, you know what? If this is just all dancing around with a wine bottle and creating sweet UIs for viruses, count me in. But yeah, we talked a lot about how, especially with Hollywood and things like that, we really get this vision in our heads, and then that also doesn't just seep into the general populace. Like, that seeps into enterprise, that seeps in to your executive team, that seeps into the decision makers who think a thing is one way, and then you have to go, no, here's actually how this works. So I thought, who better than to bring on Dave, I always forget your title as you do so many things. Are you CEO of both Binary and Trusted?
No, I'm actually I guess the official title is founder and chief hacking officers of both Binary and Trusted. So I focus more on the overall strategy and vision of the companies, and have some great leaders in place, and they all kind of pour through me, and we run the company well. So good leaders. I don't have to be the CEO. I didn't like that title anyway.
No,
yeah, no one really wants to be a CEO. And when you found a company, you can make up whatever title you want, right, Dave?
That's right. I switch every time. I'm like, hey, I'll be chief hacking officer today. I'll be whatever. So it's awesome.
By the way, Sean, your audio is really hot for some reason. Is your mic?
Is that better?
A little lower.
Wow. Okay.
I mean, you sounded hot to me.
Better?
So, I mean, yeah. You said it sounded hot. I was like, yeah, it kind of does sound kind of hot, but
It is.
Is that better?
Yes, that is much better.
Yelling at Dave.
Are you going into
Danny
ASMR
likes when you
mode,
whisper
guys?
in his ears.
Dave, when's the first time you ever actually touched a computer? Like, when's the first time you got your hands on one and was like, I wonder what this thing can do?
I look at probably my dad was the best influence on me with computers. He was a spray paint salesman, actually, but he was always really into computers, and he had a spout of being unemployed for several years. She paid for him to go back to school and get his MCSE, which allowed him to reshift and become a systems administrator and really kind of change our lives, because it was kind of tough there for a while. And during that period of time, we got our first laptop. And, I remember our first desktop, not laptop, first desktop, and we got to run Doom and figured out how to install that, and got to run some of the early video games. And then we started getting really into bulletin board systems back in the day, doing the text-based games like Trade Wars, Tellarena, a lot of the text-based MUDs and things like that. And that's where I really started really enjoying computers. In fact, story about me is I actually failed out of high school and had to take summer school just to graduate because I didn't like school. I thought it was stupid. I just wanted to play on computers and figure things out. So, I was teaching myself programming. I was teaching myself networking. I ran my own MUD that had over, 2,000 people playing it. I did all the coding, for that, and decided, well, why do I need school anyway? I can run this stuff. So I decided to go into the military and the military intelligence side. And that's when I kind of started my career. But my dad was really the inspiration for learning it. And, at a young age, I really enjoyed anything that was technology. I remember taking apart my Teddy Ruxpin, to figure out how it worked and all the mechanics behind it, and then build it back up again, which I think I broke the first one, and my parents were super pissed because it was like super expensive. And then, the second one, I figured out how to disassemble it, reassemble it, and get it to work back and forth and figure out how everything works. So, for me, technology has always been something that I've loved. And, I guess, my parents were a good inspiration for that.
So is the Teddy Ruxpin as just frightening on the inside as it is on the outside?
More so, I bet.
I may or may not have modified it quite a bit to sound even more horrible as you play the tape cassettes. So I can make it do like different voices and things like that. So that was always great. But yes, it is horrible on the inside. It's definitely a lot of. I'm sure it probably contained like cancer causing agents, stuff like that back in the day. But it was well worth it.
What? It for your enjoyment.
Yeah.
I actually saw one of those Teddy Ruxpins on a shelf at Target, And of course, it never occurred to me that somebody had actually messed with those types of things before. And I was getting ready to buy it until I saw it was like a $200 price tag for them now. Like, I don't think I want to hack on that bad enough.
What parents buying the kid a $200 toy back then? Jesus.
No, it wasn't back then.
No, it's now. Now you can't. You got.
Yeah, it was out. Yeah.
Like literally, it was at Target like the other week. And
no, back then it might have been like $30 or $40 for a Teddy Ruxpin or something.
Yeah.
Like
The inflation.
which is but still expensive. Yeah.
What was your biggest, so like I had talked about, the obviously big chasm between Hollywood and actual hacking. Like, what surprised you did you have expectations like about what it would be like to actually like think of yourself as a hacker, like what it actually entailed versus like what you end up doing, seeing the Gibson pop up versus your scan failing for the 800th time?
Well, if you see my tattoo here, I got the
yeah, no, it's almost turned.
Okay. Anyways, it's this pretty much. Anyways, which hackers was a huge inspiration for me growing up. Just the mentality of hackers being able to kind of change their world, force their world, access to free information, that type of stuff. So, I think I always had the perception that hackers was the Gibson and stuff like that. And as time kind of went on, it kind of still is. I mean, granted, you don't have the visuals, but the excitement, the understanding of how things were built and being able to tear it apart and figure things out or misconfigurations, like that puzzle piece. A lot of people give the offensive security folks a lot of shit for, a lot of stuff for.
I'll fix it in post, Dave.
Thank you. For the try harder mentality, and I understand why. Like, we've come a long ways in our industry, but that mentality actually really came out of. You had to, as a hacker early on, there wasn't, articles other than things like in French or, tutorials or video instruction sets of how to do things. You really had to understand the foundational technology and, the code and figure out ways to get around it. And, that foundational understanding wasn't something you could really just say like, hey, this is how you teach that. Because you were figuring out new things that had never happened before. And so I think during that period of time, the time that I came in, around the late 90s, early 2000s, was kind of an interesting time because there wasn't tutorials, there wasn't college classes, there wasn't anything like that. So it was really this brand new field, and no one really knew what that meant. And honestly, I mean, DEF CON, from a conference perspective, was just like hackers. Like you'd go there and people are there with mohawks, and you had Renderman with the wireless packs on and everything. It was what you would expect hackers to be. And obviously we've formalized, we've become a lot better. We're, an industry now. And, but a lot of those folks really paved the way. And, get some of my, old time heroes like the Shmoo Group and CDC and those folks, that really kind of forged the way for a lot of us. It was a really cool time that I was a part of, that we got to learn a lot, but also kind of forge the next generation of hackers. And, now we're forging the next generation of hackers. It's hard to use buzzwords, I guess, but, these are the types of things that I think are really exciting for our industry, but it really hasn't changed. You still have to be creative. You still have to figure things out. You still have to, understand the foundational technologies. We just have a lot more information now about those, which is cool.
What would you say would be like for somebody, we kind of covered this last time. And anybody else, feel free to hop in. Sean, I don't think you're on this for the last time, but now that I have you two here, for the person sitting there, maybe they're just getting into the industry. Maybe they're not in the industry at all, because I think a big a misunderstanding is people think that every hacker works in InfoSec, or that everybody in InfoSec is a hacker, right? Like some of the most dangerous people I know, they work in like pharmaceuticals or, like some other unrelated field. Person who's sitting there that wants to get into this, like, where do they start, right? Like, where do they even begin to like get past all of this screen of eliteness that's been put before them?
I think the biggest thing to recognize is that yes, there's a lot of cool people that have done cool research before in the past, and you can absolutely be part of that. I remember going to DEF CON and being like, oh my gosh, like, Fedor or Shmoo Group. I remember seeing Bruce on stage, and he had built this like UPS box that looked just like a UPS, but it really was a relay. It was basically basically was a transparent VPN. This is, early 2000s. And, you could do physical assessments and drop things. I'm like, man, these guys are the coolest guys ever. They're super smart. I'll never be like them. I'll never be able to know that, this type of stuff they do. And I think the interesting part is that, if you, one, make security your hobby, you enjoy doing it. And I'm not saying make work your life. That's not what I'm saying, but enjoy what you do. I think you will be successful at anything, regardless if it's in hacking or security or anything else. And I just found a passion for that stuff, and eventually, started releasing my own tools, open source, and helping others out and getting knowledge out there. And I think that really, was able to do. And I think kids getting into, not just kids, but people trying to make a change in careers and things like that. There's so much information out there. It can really feel like you're lost in what you want to do. The biggest advice I could give is that, find something that is an interest topic for you, whether that's incident response, forensics, or reverse engineering, or exploit development, or penetration testing, or application security, and home in on those subjects. There's plenty of time to learn other things, but home in on those subjects and kind of, focus on that as kind of your hobby that you enjoy doing, and then the rest kind of comes naturally. My biggest concern right now, I guess, for this industry is that because it has been commercialized in many extent, which again I look at as very much a good thing. Obviously, I run two cybersecurity businesses, so that's a great thing. But the concern I have now is that we always talk about the skill shortage gap in cybersecurity, and what they mean by skill shortage is that we need people right now that could do the job, that have the experience. But what about all these kids that are coming out of college or just coming into the field that have no experience? They're having trouble finding jobs right now. And the college courses that I've seen out there are just horrendous for the most part. Not all of them. There's some really good programs out there. But these college classes, I mean, I had a kid, I just got done this morning, actually. I was at a careers day. I went to a local high school. And, one of the kids was a sophomore that came in. It was freshmen to seniors, but someone from a college software class that was interested in security came to this as well. And I said, well, what did you spend your semester on? He's like, oh, we're doing ethical hacking right now. I'm like, oh, cool. Like, have you guys been able to use like Kali Linux yet, or Metasploit? They're like, oh, no. They have us just using FTK this entire semester. I'm like, okay. Like, have you done any type, like, what's your next semester look like? Oh, it's more on like autopsy and stuff like that. I'm like, oh God. Okay. And, but I mean, that's these classes. You have professors that are not people in cybersecurity, haven't, developed this type of curriculum before, and they're piecing together things. And unfortunately, these kids are coming out with little to no foundational support. To be honest, unless you're going to like the NSA accredited classes that are out there for, the NSA cyber operator stuff that they have, which are amazing classes. I think there's only 16 colleges that have that certification. I mean, I would probably just focus on a computer science degree because you're going to get much more understanding on, how computers work, programming, and then applying that to cybersecurity is a lot easier than, running the roulette of, whether or not you actually go to a good cybersecurity course. So, and if colleges are out, cool. If not, there's so many options available. But I think it's, again, focusing on your passion that you like doing and homing in. And there's so much information. I mean, you have Hack in the Box, you have, various certs and courses you can go through, like offensive security, hands-on applied type stuff. You have stuff that isn't cert-based that you can learn from. So it's just making it your hobby, I think, is the biggest thing I could say to people just getting into this industry.
And I think a lot of companies. I'm sorry.
No, I was going to say, I'm going to finally
of...
let one of my other guests follow up on the line of questioning, and I'm going to shut up from. Although there is one in the chat, the real one. I am following up on that later, but not right now. Continue, Dev.
No, I was going to say, I think a lot of companies also need to kind of get a high level understanding of what cybersecurity is, because if you look at some of the job descriptions, they're ridiculous. Oh, we want a master's or PhD, and you have to have 15 years. It's like, really? I mean, first of all, you're looking for an entry level position, and you're asking for a master's degree with 10 years experience or 5 years or whatever the case is. Let's be realistic. No one's going to be out there who's going to have that experience that's going to want to take an entry level job. So I think a lot of companies also need us to be more educated. And as you looking for employment, you also want to do your due diligence on any company you want to work for. Because cybersecurity is so wide, and like the company from company is so different that you may end up getting pigeonholed into a company under a cybersecurity title and has nothing to do with cybersecurity. It's more about babysitting logs or looking at a RAF and making sure things are okay, which is just more operational stuff. So that's the other thing is, if you're really keen to go in cybersecurity, make sure you not only get your certs, get your education, really do your due diligence, and getting so prepared, but also look at the company you're going to, because they will also
Yeah.
help your progression in the field.
Yeah, and one thing I'll say about that too, when we are looking for candidates, we require 17 different degrees, and just kidding. We we look at things from
Family
a perspective of
lineage.
yeah. All of your family must be in cybersecurity. You have, but it's one of those things where we look at, one, how do we mentor new people coming in? That it's a cost to do that, right? And we're a consulting shop, so at least at Trusted Tech. And at Trusted Tech, we have to look at that and say, well, how long is it going to take us to get these resources billable so that we can then, recoup, money from them and be profitable as a company? Basic, a business 101. We, have people, we have to make money, and that allows for employment. So, when we're hiring folks that are coming out of these college classes, if they don't have foundational stuff, it takes us about 2 years to train them to a point to where we can actually put them on an engagement, right? And then after that, that's a long time investment for an individual. Kids that go through these NSA accredited classes, usually not much from a ramp up time period, get into consulting pools where they more of a junior and then mentor off of more of a senior level resource to get into those. So, I think the courses really have a big deal. But what we also look at, from a personnel perspective when we're hiring, and this is a good thing to differentiate yourself if you're looking at getting in cybersecurity, is that the qualification stuff is typically in HR the bare minimum that you need. Don't get me wrong, totally crazy in some of those ones, like hey, you have to have 1 year of experience in a CISP. Well, hey, CISP, you need several years of experience to get a CISP. Doesn't make any sense, right? So there's a lot of the HR bureaucracy there too. So the bare minimum is what's listed on the qualifications, right? But what we look at is like, hey, okay, so you have a master's degree or you have done this type of stuff that meets these qualifications. Cool. What differentiates you than anybody else out there from a resume perspective? Granted, we have never met face to face. I've never seen you before. I don't know you from anybody else. So are there things that you've done, that differentiate you from others? So, do you have a GitHub page associated to it? I'm not expecting you to have written the next iteration of Metasploit, but, do you have projects that you've done, to show your code, or have you done Hack in the Box? Have you done other courses and things like that to learn? Are you in the process of going through like the OSCP or something like that? What are things that you're doing that make you a little bit different? And that gets you to, the interview stage. And then once you get to the interview stage, what I'm looking for is, one, are they coachable, individuals? Are they folks that can learn off of others? Because I'm going to teach you everything you need to know. You probably have a good foundation, but I'm going to teach you how this works inside of this company, give you the experience that you need, and grow you to, senior and your whole career, whatever. And then, two, do they have the excitement and passion to be in this position and job, right? And if I see those two things, and they already have demonstrated the knack to be able to be a self-starter and learn, most likely I'm going to hire that individual for that position, right? And I think that's the biggest difference that I see for people that I hire versus people I won't hire. If they're just like, hey, I'm coming out of college and I'm expecting 6 figures, and you need to give me this, and you need to give me that, and you need to give me this, I'm like, yeah, hey, it's not going to be a good fit. Sorry, like I can't, that's not going to work. However, if you're hungry and you want to learn, I will make you successful, right? And that's what I try to instill in folks that I talk to, is like, hey, it's a big field. There's so many different specialties in areas, technical, non-technical, compliance, all the way to response and defense, and home in on what you want to do, and then show your passion through that, and good things come after that.
Yeah, but building on that, Dave, I mean, you hit the nail on the head. It really comes down to curiosity. Curiosity is key, right? If you're curious about something, you're interested, it goes back to that core hacker mindset, which is you're curious about the system. What does it do? How does this work? I'm really interested in folks at Trimark and really interested in talking with people at conferences when they're curious and they're interested about something. Like, how does this work? Dig into it, figure it out. One of the things I think holds people back a lot in the industry is, oh, well, we've already discovered all the things about X, And I think that hopefully people have seen that's not the case at all. I mean, we thought NTLM Relay was the big thing within Windows and Active Directory, and then someone figured out how to Kerberos Relay, and someone figured out how to relay something else, and then there's something else. So there's different elements of what people can do, and the research, but it always seems to be something where you are standing on the achievements of others that came before and building and creating and shifting and pivoting off those things. And without that curiosity, you don't identify what those possibilities are around that. I always like to say that I fail to success. Like, I have a ton of failures that no one will hear about, unless you watch my B-Sides Charm Talk from a few years ago called Fail Time. But really, it comes down to trying things, figuring out what doesn't work, and then trying to see if there's something else there. And it's entirely possible that you identify that something takes down a server or a service when you're testing and doing your research. The next step off of that is an RCE if you're interested in that part of it. But InfoSec is so large that there's so many opportunities for people that have different skill sets. Like Danny said, you don't have to be an elite hacker in order to be in the industry or to have a job in IT. The other thing I want to mention is that everyone who works in IT and supports information technology, you are involved in security in one way or another. So don't feel like you can't shift over into InfoSec proper just because you feel like you're doing operational type activities. It's about the curiosity. We've worked with many ops team members with customers all around the world, and some of these folks that are managing Active Directory, managing Azure AD, managing VMware, they are more on top of the security side of things than some of the security folks that I've talked to in the past. And I think that curiosity, that interest, that desire to figure the system out, what it can do, and how to really protect it is the core of that. And then the soft skills help from there as well.
Well, it's interesting, Sean, because you look at how you kind of came through and how I became familiar with you. You saw a need on the directory security initially, right? And I mean a lot more than that too. But I mean, you basically were able to take what others had done from a foundational perspective and just amplify it 10,000 feet because of your research and homing in, understanding how things operate and work, and then from there taking it to the next level to where I would say, Microsoft is, as a company is better off because of your research, right? The industry is better off because of your research. And you were able to solidify yourself as being like the AD guy, in the industry. Anytime I think AD, I'm like, yeah, Sean, like we're Sean. Like, it wasn't that Active Directory was new. Active Directory had been around for years and years and years and years, but it really had never been a deep dive into what AD was and the awareness around how important it was from a complexity perspective, trust relationships, and then you see other folks doing the same type of stuff. You had the ADCS stuff, with HarmJoin, those guys. I mean, it's just that whole compounded industry is a whole area of focus and that you can go into and just diving into the subjects, understanding it, and then from there building yourself up from it. And you did an amazing job with that to solidify who you were, right?
Yeah, no, I appreciate Dave. Thank you for the huge kudos. One of the things that I did for my first talks, and actually a talk that I put in my first DerbyCon many years ago, and meeting Dave at ShakaCon, was basically just pulling things together and kind of chaining things that other people had done, identifying what are these attacks, how could these be put together in interesting ways, and building on that and going, okay, well, this is how you could attack Active Directory. This is how you could get domain admin. What does that look like? And then what could you do? How could you persist with that? How could you compromise that environment and keep it that way for a while? And then flip over to the other side. What is the defensive methods around that? How do you protect that? And one of the things that, Dave, I loved about your ShakaCon talk back in 2015 was that Dave would take a topic and go, okay, I wreck this environment by doing this. And defenders, here's what you do in order to protect against this, and here are the ways to detect it. And then I shifted my entire conference presentation methodology around that, which was here's the attack, here's the way to defend it, and then wrap it up at the end with here's a great way to really ensure that you level up your security. And all my conference talks since then, I've used that model, and that seems to work very well. So I appreciate what you've done, David, and showing these things at a level that people can understand them and say, yeah, a lot of this isn't really that difficult, but building on them and expanding these things and finding these issues, doing the research and really digging into stuff, that's the kind of the part which can set you apart. That's the element that can set you apart from others.
So
it's all about this podcast, right? The demystifying hacking. That's essentially what we're doing. We're saying, hey, here's how this attack works. Let's take the magic out of this. And then let's show what this is actually doing that you can defend against it. I think, when I first came into this industry, the penetration testing industry was very closed off. It wasn't sharing much with Blue, and nor did Blue really understand what that meant, right? So it was very myopically of, hey, there's an exploit here from this specific vulnerability, from this specific patch that we were able to exploit. They didn't care about any of the other stages behind that. They didn't care about lateral movement or pass the hash or anything else. It was that specific vulnerability, fix that vulnerability, and all of a sudden we're supposed to be fine, right? And it's the you hear the term a lot. It's obviously used quite a bit, but the tactics, techniques, and procedures of attackers are really where our focus has always should have been, which is, hey, how do attackers operate by? Because we're going to have that one missing patch somewhere, and how do we formulate a strategy to defend against it? Let's take the magic out of it. Let's take the crazy 0 days and stuff like that somebody did, and let's take the magic out of that, and let's actually show what this means, but why it's important to understand the latter stages. And I think once we started to get that, I think you saw an acceleration in InfoSec far beyond what I would have expected in a very short period of time. And I think that was, a credit to a lot of folks in the industry really coming out there and saying, hey, let's take the mystique out of this hacking stuff, and let's focus more on how enterprises can defend against it. And really that purple approach, that red and blue kind of coming together to make a difference in that organization, the world, technology, et cetera. It was really cool to see.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I think there's also an old school mentality that happens in a lot of industries, not just InfoSec, where there's gatekeeping that happens, and it's like, oh, well, pay no attention to this. This is kind of magic. What happens behind the curtain is magical because we're the wizards. And so I think breaking that down and getting rid of that mentality and going, I worked with a guy who had an approach, and he had wired up the rack and the equipment closet so that he was the only one that knew where things connected. And he's like, that's job security. And I was like, no, that means you never go on vacation. You never get time off, because anytime there's a problem, you're the one that they have to go to. I want to make sure that I build myself out of a job whenever I'm working somewhere. I want to make sure I have things documented so that way I can move on to other things that are more interesting. If I feel like I've completed this or checked that off, mission accomplished, move on to the next thing. And if you are constantly trying to build these kind of castles or empires or whatever, and making sure that you're the person that has to be the one involved, I feel like you can never branch beyond that. And it's important to, like we're saying, demystify the hacking stuff. What you see in the movies, some of it on the Mr. Robot side, probably a little more realistic. Some of it on the other side, the cheesy movies. One of my favorite movies is The Core. It's a great popcorn flick. But of course, the hacking is totally unrealistic. But it's fun. It's enjoyable. It's a popcorn flick. So it's important to also recognize that some of this stuff is kind of fantastical, so to speak. I remember watching a movie recently, and they were going around and attacking different things, and I was like, okay, that looks realistic. And then I started realizing that, the stuff that we do at Trimark, the stuff that other companies do at TrustedSec and Red Siege and others, these are the things that are helping to improve the security of these organizations. And these situations in the movies where these attackers are going after a system, and yes, I use the word attacker very specifically and not hacker, they're going after the system and trying to take it down. These security companies are really trying to, especially the ones that I mentioned, TrustedSec, Trimark, and Red Siege, and others like it, like Black Hills, really trying to make things better, trying to publish information in the community, get information out there, so that way not just our customers are the ones that we can improve, but also help the community at large. And I think, Dave, that's another thing that I really appreciate and respect you for, is a focus on community, publishing tools, publishing information, doing conference talks. I don't think I've ever seen someone do as many conference talks as you do. I don't think Dave, I think Dave has an automatic yes response when you email him or message him like, hey, Dave, can you speak at my conference?
I keep telling him I keep telling him to get an assistant to be a body blocker for those things, and Dave's like, nah.
Yeah, and that's no slight on Dave. Dave, you're amazing, and I don't know how you keep up with it. I mean, you talked earlier out of high school, and I'm sure you've got 5 conferences that you have probably tomorrow that you're doing, but I think it's impressive, and I appreciate the community aspect of it. And when I built Trimark, I wanted to make sure that was a core element as well.
So
yeah. So one thing I'd like to throw out there too is that I know a lot of red teams go, oh, it's us against them, and we're gonna win, they're gonna lose, and it's like, if you're a red team and you're winning, you're automatically losing, because it's not about you versus them; it's about the company. So, and you guys should be working together. That's when you talk about the purple team. Synergy between red and blue needs to happen. Otherwise, you're gonna be destined to fail going forward.
Yeah,
so
the mentality
because I know that.
Yeah, the mentality of we're the best, hackers are the best, that type of stuff is you want to say that is legacy or old school, but it's really still not, right? I mean, it's still prevalent in our industry, and it's something that we have to really take a look at and say, yeah, I mean, when somebody does some new research, I jump up and applaud, because that research, is countless hours of 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning binges. And I'm not saying that's the greatest thing you want to do from your health perspective, but I've all been there. I've been there for so long. And you want to compliment the person for the amount of effort and work that they've done, and also sharing their research to make that product or that company or whatever ends up being better. But at the end of the day, mentality comes down to what you just said right here, which is our whole position here is to essentially make the world a safer place when it comes to technology, right? And whether that's our organization that we're working with, or whether it's a animal device or a Jeep, those things are all technological things that run every single day of our life. And we always want to try to make those products, those things better, to protect people, to protect information, to protect our societies, to protect our intellectual properties, whatever it ends up being, your customers. And I think that's a noble cause. And I think a lot of people lose sight of that, where it becomes more of a competition of who's more elite than the other. Can I get around stuff? And I think a little bit of competition is good, especially if it's a mature program, but with always the mindset that you're trying to raise that bar so it's even harder for you next time to get in, right? And I think the cloak and dagger stuff that we used to do, the transparency that we have now with red and blue, I think that's getting more and more corrected as time goes along. But it's just going to be some of those things I think we have to continue to talk about, so that it gets out of kind of our systems, where it's collaborative, not about winning, right?
So
Yeah, Dave, I have two questions for you, and they're tied together. So I'm going to jump in here, Danny. The first question is, what is the most interesting attack path that you've identified when going against a customer, and how did that work together? How were you able to identify that? And complicated's good, but something that's very interesting that you're like, I never would have seen this before. I never would have thought about this before. And then tying into that, what is a customer detection or configuration that just stumped you and maybe your team, and you're just like, this is a really tough environment to go after. We have to figure out something else.
Yeah, well, first of all, I'm going to give a shout out to my team, because the example I'm going to use for this one is a attack path that one of our red teamers used that I thought was absolutely brilliant. And when you read those reports, sometimes you're coming through teams, it's some of these are, you're like, how did you even think of that? Like, that's totally crazy. And so I think from a story perspective, this is before SMS became popular. And so this is a few years ago, where we used the pretext of it did open source intelligence gathering against the company, and then we pretext their SMS authentication mechanism that they use for two-factor authentication. We found a cross-site scripting issue on one of their sites, and then we basically did a phish. But what was great about it was, thinking about how humans think, we sent a text message to the individual saying, the individual that we're targeting, that we wanted access to, saying that we were going to be doing some maintenance with the multi-factor authentication system within the next week at this specific time of this specific period. You may need to repair your device in order to ensure you get SMS notifications. And so we pretexted it with that, and we let it sit for a while so that they saw it and they knew, so it was in the back of their head. And so that when we actually did the MFA challenge, the person accepted it, it was push notification, accepted it, and allowed us in. We happened to be an IT resource that had, admin rights over the infrastructure. So, I think it's the creativity of, one, knowing how to think from a technology perspective, but also two, using technology in a way that it was designed, but so that's one of my fun ones, because it's kind of a human element, and getting around notification, and using that, target somebody that is technically savvy in many cases, that should have, probably identified that, but didn't, because, it was all within the normal confines and context of what you'd expect. And, what we think about phishing too, it's like that exercise, that we always taught is it has to be a sense of urgency right now, right? So we're like, hey, take the sense of urgency away right now. Like, hey, next week, by the way, we're gonna be doing some system maintenance at this time. Totally chill, no issue, don't have to worry about it now. Oh man, it's an annoyance. I just got this multi-factor authentication push. Okay, you're all set, right? So we took a lot of the things that were taught from a training and education perspective, flipped it around, and used all those kind of things against it, which I thought was pretty neat.
And that blends in with what the normal cadence and flow of IT operations is. Hey, by the way, here's a notification. We're doing this. Okay, well, this seems normal. I see this. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and accept it. The pre-texting, I think with you and members of your team, it often comes back to social engineering, because I think that's kind of where your thought process goes. And I think that follows with the hacker mindset. So yeah, the follow-up question about what's a way that an organization really detected you or figured something out that was able to stop you in interesting ways, or something that you maybe haven't seen before.
Yeah, so when we go after an organization, usually the technology that they're using, whether it's an EDR product or an endpoint, whatever, the firewalls, web application firewalls, whatever it ends up being from a preventative mechanism perspective, we pretty much know ahead of time going into there what they have, because we've already done a number of open source reconnaissance efforts, open source intelligence gathering, reconnaissance efforts. Maybe we did a pre-phish just to profile their system, so that when they communicate to profiling their system, it doesn't do anything malicious. It's just understanding their technology stack. And so we have a pretty good idea when we're going after a company what their technology is. So, all of the attacks and tools and methods that we use circumvent that specific product. We, have a research division that goes through and makes sure that, hey, if they're using X product, we can get around it so that we don't get detected. No problem. Okay. So we have those capabilities built. It's great. The issue that you run into, and this is a good lesson for security today, is that pre-canned out of the box stuff, if it's a decent attacker, can most likely circumvent when you've made that product your own in your own environment of what looks normal and what doesn't. That's when we have a really tough time. And so we got into this organization, and it's a funny story because it was more of a longer term endeavor where we had to, we had to wait for the right opportunity. So there was an exploit that came, a real tough customer, mature customer. We found an exploit that they had for one of their things, and it just come out. We wrote it for, the proof of concept came out. We wrote the exploit, got it working, shot it out to an individual. We got remote code execution onto the system, got our payload, C2, everything's good. We're on the system, right? So it was one of those ones where it's like, hey, if something opportunistic comes up for this company, go and use that to go after the organization. They cared less about the what, but more so what happened post exploitation, again, which is where you want to be at from a customer perspective. And we got code execution on the system. We got our C2. Everything's great. We're all high fiving. Everything's perfect. And what this company did that really screwed us in this sense was they categorized. They went over an exercise that categorized technical people versus non-technical people. So if you had an IT role or something like that, you'd be looked in an Active Directory group, technical. And if you were like a sales role, marketing role, it'd be non-technical. And if they saw any type of commands being executed on a non-technical person, triggered alarm to the SOC. And now we're not going to drop into a shell or things like that, but we're just looking at the system, trying to figure out anything else. We didn't use like NetUser or anything like that, but they tripped on one of the things that we're looking at that emulated a technical person doing something on the system, which bubbled up, and we got shut down on that system like within like 10 minutes. And we're all like super pissed because we just spent all this time weaponizing this exploit. We had every resource on it. We got code execution. We dropped our custom C2 that no one knows about, that still hasn't been detected over the past several years. And all of a sudden, everything's good to go. We're like high-fiving each other, and then all of a sudden, 10 minutes later, we're booted out. So it was definitely the talk about the competition aspect, but also happy. We were clapping on the phone for the team as they got us, and I thought it was really good success for them. So it's the approach of understanding your environment, whether that's cloud or on-prem, and looking at what your what is normal behavior and what's not, really made a big difference, and still continues to make a big difference for us when we're going to an organization, because it's like running over a landmine field. You don't know what you're going to step on, right?
Dave, first of all, how's your schedule today? Do I just have you until 3? Because I have a few more, but if you got to run, I have closing questions for you.
No, I'm still good.
All right,
good.
Awesome. There's one that came up this week that I really wanted to hit. I didn't want to forget about it because I don't think we talk enough. We usually give like a passing cybersecurity programs and colleges haven't caught up and blah 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 blah. Right? Like I think we pretty much all believe that. I mean, there are probably some good ones coming up, but I have yet to see it. I didn't go through a cybersecurity degree program at any university at all. My associate degree was irrelevant in 2002 when it came out. I don't know if you saw this week recently talking about demystifying it for kids who are in cybersecurity degree programs who are trusting their outlooks to be shaped by academics. I have the quote up on the screen. I'll read it to you from a Joe Cutler, who has since locked down his account, which, I mean, probably a good idea. My advisor is buying me a new laptop. I just learned that delivery is going to be intercepted by Penn University so they can set up the machine. I pressed and said they were installing spyware software called CrowdStrike. What does that say? Just now, there's a whole thread on this, right? There's a whole, he got beat up.
Followed it.
You have you? Yeah, he got beat up pretty good. What? How could we? I don't know how we could have a brighter vision of cybersecurity programs, and we can start to describe what's wrong with this first of all.
Yeah, I mean, one, I think lack of experience, right? In the corporate side, they have a very myopic view of how this is run. They have a lot of folks that are probably very much in the same type of groupthink, and it's no different than early hackers and the whole government surveillance stuff and things to that effect, right? And so I can see from a privacy perspective their view. Okay, I'm not condoning obviously that statement in any way, shape, or form, and it's obviously ridiculous. It's an enterprise for detecting intrusion, not spying on them. But there is obviously some concern folks around telemetry data coming from people or myself and eavesdrop and do those types of things. So I get that aspect. The issue that I have here is I will see a lot of folks coming from academia that have unrealistic expectations and demands what our business should be doing for, right? And whether that's curtailing our hours or specific salary demands or exceptions that I have to put in place, i.e., no security software or monitoring, things that are unrealistic expectations, right? And I don't think it's great to dismiss it. And I honestly, the guy was very rude back to people, so I understand the pile up. I don't like how, and social media is designed this way. I don't like how we pile on people for mistakes that were made. Obviously this kid doesn't have a lot of experience. Doesn't know what it looks like in corporate environment. Yes, he has expectations set about things that are going to be fairly standard throughout his career and life. And if he doesn't, he's probably not going to be very successful in that career. But it's also easy to tar and feather somebody too. So I'm kind of in the middle there, saying I kind of understand where he's coming from. I don't support that because it's obviously not how the real world works. But at the same time, it's like he probably should have not said some of the things he said back as kind of the comments that he made to some individuals and folks, and I think he called somebody a bootlicker or something like that.
Yeah.
So disrespectful, obviously, in many cases, and if that attitude doesn't curb, he's probably not going to be very successful in corporate environment, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think this was a good exercise in nuance, right? Like this could have went several dozen different ways. And I think it's like I always come at it from the aspect of like me 10 years ago when I was just getting into security, I believed a lot, and I believed anything like with somebody who I thought had authority had to say. Some people use social media likes and impressions as authority measures, right? Like 170,000 views. You see the numbers right there on the thing. So yeah, I think it was a good, like I wanted to get your take on it because good exercise in nuance. Like I get why he might not know it, but when you double down and all of his other academics came in there too, with somebody made the comment of like, just install Gentoo or Arch, that'll take care of it. And I was like, I don't think it's going to solve your problem, bro. I think you just created two new problems for yourself.
And hopefully you didn't take any of the comments of like, hey, demands as willing to listen, to folks, that are looking for things. Because listen, I would love to offer everybody, $5 million. Okay, I would love to be able to do that. Like if I had that, I could do that. I would do that. I threw away all my money, like Mr. Beast and the 1,000 people that he's cured from blindness or whatever, and he got shit for that. I'm like, so you gotta bleep that out. Sorry. But then it's those types of things where you're like, hey, the guy's genuinely trying to help, people. Like if he has the capabilities to do that, that's absolutely fantastic. But at the end of the day, like I run a business, and maybe you're making $90,000 or $100,000, and I can bill you out for $200,000, and I have a 20% profit margin, which allows me to expand the company and grow a little bit more. like those are how businesses work. Like if I just broke even all the time, we would just be the same company, the same amount of people. We wouldn't be able to do promotions or raises and take care of people or do better insurance or trainings, things like that. So a lot of people don't understand how businesses operate and work, and that's fine. You're not supposed to, but I think that the lesson in this one is if you're coming into this industry, have some humility, have some passion. Don't come in with an ego. And learn from others, but also know that you can craft and forge your own way. And that the way people have been doing it before, it doesn't necessarily mean it needs to be the way that you need to do moving forward. So there's so much opportunity here and learning lessons, I guess, but hopefully our next generation learns that.
I mean, I don't think you should enter any company guns blazing on your first day and stuff. Like maybe get a lay of the land and then you can make some changes.
Dev's talking about me my first day in TriMac.
Yeah, I really looked good 2 weeks before I made a bunch of changes.
Okay, first of all, I have a hoodie on because I had my workout shirt on, and I didn't want that to happen. But speaking of which, somebody asked in the chat, Dave, now that we've talked about all this, which another big part of demystifying hacking is knowing when to blow off steam, right? Like, it's frustrating work. It's a lot of brain-intensive work. It's a lot of rage-inducing work sometimes. One person in the chat asked, what do you do, or like, how do you find time to get as good as you are and still find time to lift heavy things? Somebody asked that in chat, alluding to Dave's weightlifting.
If you look at my Twitter stream, you'd probably think that I lift 7 hours a day, right? And that's not true. What I do is I wake up in the morning prior to getting done, knock out, a workout routine, whether that's running or HIIT training, whether that's lifting weights. I always try to get my workouts done in the morning before everybody wakes up because it's one of those things where, I don't have any distractions. And the most important part about it is I've already accomplished something good for myself. I feel good about myself. So I start the day on a positive. So my day's already great, right? Now the day can go to complete crap and in a handbasket, but at the end of the day, I still did something really good. So, it's not a complete wash of a day. So I think it's just making it a priority and finding time to be able to do it. And don't get me wrong, it's not like, everybody's busy. It's not because everybody's like, oh man, you run 2 companies and you do this and do that. No. We're all busy. It doesn't matter what our positions are, our titles, what we've done, where we are in our careers. Every single person is busy. So it's a matter of prioritizing your time to spend time for yourself. And one thing I'll tell you is, for those that haven't known me, I was very big. I used to be, 315 pounds. I had heart issues. I had heart surgery to correct it. I was having a number of health ailments that my doctor basically came to me and said, listen, if you don't curb your changes, you don't change your lifestyle, you're not going to be around for your kids. That's a pretty bold statement to make. So at that point in time, I was like, okay, I need to change it. But I was, out partying all the time. I was out drinking until 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning with friends. I'd code until 3 o'clock in the morning. I remember some of my comment code in set, the social engineer toolkit, had too drunk to code. We'll code later. Or this shit is, or there's comment in there saying, I don't know what I wrote the night before, but that's fucking magic and it's awesome. And so, it's like you look at that code, you're like, what was I doing there? I don't even know how I wrote that. It's like, it's amazing. And you're like, I'm not gonna even touch it. It's just code that will remain forever. I don't even know what it does. So, but that was not healthy, right? Staying up till 3, 4, 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, sometimes not sleeping at all for 48 hours, and thinking that was a badge of honor, and pushing out new. I remember coding on an airplane, getting off the airplane, going to the hotel, coding there, getting done, staying up till 3 o'clock in the morning, getting up on the airplane again, coding. That was my entire life, right? And, I'm glad I did a lot of that because it taught me a lot what to do. But at the same time, it was destroying my body. It was destroying myself. And I felt just absolutely horrible because of it. So, I had to make a change. And, what I can honestly say is, yes, we live in a stressful thing, but don't make work your life. You don't need to work 80 hours a week. You don't need to destroy yourself, making a name for yourself. Have fun with it. Do it in a 40-hour week and, have a good time doing it and then spend time for your family. Those are the most important things in life because you don't get a do-over. As I look back at it, and I'll tell you, last thing I'll wrap up on a lot, but COVID for me, obviously horrible situation, disastrous, but what it allowed me to do was reprioritize my focus on my family, which I thought was really important. And so I don't travel as much. Yes, I still do speaking engagements, but I got to coach my kids' basketball teams, heavily involved in their lives, and caught it right at the right time. So, for me, I think a reprioritization of your family and your health is most important. And then from there, rest of the in line, job support, that lifestyle. So it's a hard lesson I needed to learn almost died because of it, but I'm much stronger because of it. So
Here, here.
Yeah, same here. And you're the reason why I'm wearing my workout clothes underneath my hoodie right now. And one more question. This was too weird not to ask you. Like, I think you know this person. His screen name is the real ONCEE, the real ones. Who's your favorite hacker to share a urinal next to? I don't know. I want to know.
So, funny story about that. So, Bill Auntie, he phenomenal, by the way. He works at teaches the cybersecurity curriculum over at Marshall, and he's a great guy. I've known him for years. But the early stages of DerbyCon, prior to DerbyCon ever happening, there was a free class that a bunch of us held. Martin Pure Hate was there, Adrian, a number of other folks. Just like the really early stages of DerbyCon. Like this is like DerbyCon 0.1 basically. And it was a free Metasploit class that you could go to for a day, and we basically had like 300 people show up to this thing. It was free. I was like, oh, we need a bigger venue. This is awesome. It was huge. So we just did exploit development, teaching everybody inside out of Metasploit. Again, demystifying the hacking thing, and that's really what spawned DerbyCon in our heads. It's like, hey, this is an awesome community event where people learned. It was free. Make it accessible to a lot of people. And the peeing next to one is I was peeing in the bathroom.
As one does, sure, yeah.
That's one does in the bathroom.
Traditionally.
Yeah. I was like, why did it take me so long to think about the bathroom? But so I was peeing in the bathroom, and there was somebody next to me, and I saw on Twitter later on, it was Bill saying, "Oh my God, I just peed next to Dave Kennedy." So Bill and I became good friends after that, and we got to pee next to each other, and that's how we formally met each other and became friends. So
I'm not sure what's the creepier tweet, that or the dude who did the creep shot at John Hammond coming out of a con. I don't know if you saw that. Like, somebody took a picture of John Hammond, and it was like a sniper's view. It didn't have, like, it was just a really far away shot. And John's like, I'm not really sure how I feel about this. And then it turned into a meme for a long time. But okay, yeah, I had to ask that question.
Bill Garner's good people. So good. I'm glad you joined on, man. And he does a great job over at Marshall University. So great security program. One of the good universities.
Yeah, he also said, I also miss Fat Dave sometimes.
Hey, Fat Dave was an awesome guy. I'm still that guy. Just I might crush you when I hug you. That's all.
Final thoughts from anybody else on our panel before we get out of here, because Dave's a very busy man.
I have a quick wrap up thought question for Dave. Do you feel like security today, tomorrow, is getting better? Is it getting worse, or is it about the same, or is there a nuance there that you want to add to or cover?
I think it's as a whole gotten a lot better. I think we have the people, the right visibility than we've ever had. The biggest battle that we have is like, the company's not taking security seriously. Well, I mean, if you don't do that now, I mean, you get hammered in the media, SEC violations, your board is firing people. So, I think the visibility part that we always used to complain about is gone, right? And that was the biggest hurdle. Now it's a matter of what do we do and what's the most effective strategy? The problem is that you have people in leadership positions that are bad leaders, and they have bad strategy, and they are like, hey, we have all of these, historical legacy issues from this company. We're just going to slap products on top of it, and then we're going to call it good, right? Versus, building a security program within an organization, which takes a lot of time and effort and things like that. So I think, as a whole, the industry is much more respected, and we have more visibility. But we also have to recognize that it's to the comment earlier around not always wanting. We also have to recognize that it's not always about security. In fact, like, we're just a tiny piece of a company, right? And a company as a whole risk universe, whether it's supply chain or financial or legal or HR, we're just a small part of that entire equation. And so I think we've started talking the right language. I think we're at the right table. It's just a matter for us to continue to execute on that. We're actually focusing on the right things technically as well, right? We're focusing on hacker strategies and mindsets and who they are, and mapping out, these organizations' capabilities, and looking at threat models and building those threat models based on industry verticals and being able to build defenses against those. Like, that's stuff that we always dreamed that we'd want to do. So I think we're in the right path. My only concern is that, big disruptors in technology that, technology is moving at such a rapid pace. Will we be able to continue to hold that pace as things change? I mean, you're talking about, artificial intelligence and quantum computing, stuff like that. They're going to be major disruptors. I think probably not in our lifetime, but definitely in the future. Those are things that I think, we need to be cognizant of, is that it's always changing. We have to be mindful of that and not be doing things. But I do think we're on the right trajectory, and I think security has gotten a lot better for the most part. Again, there's still really immature companies. There's still companies that don't care about security. There's still companies that are completely vulnerable. And, and the industry, I think, will continue to try to improve. But, as a whole, we've gotten so much better.
Great, thank you.
So my question for you is, what is your favorite programming language and why? Or your two go-to programming language?
My go-to programming language, hands down, is always going to be Python. Just because it's so easy to build something that you need quickly, and work and understandable. From an object-oriented programming language, is one of my favorites. And it's what I did most of my tool development. And if you look at I think look at Trusted Sec, you look at my page, it's like 98% Python. But
you had me at Python.
But I mean, I do see opportunities. Rust is awesome from perspective. Golang is pretty awesome from a computational perspective. Sometimes you got to get dirty and get into C++ and assembly for what you're doing from a research perspective. So the language really depends on what you're trying to accomplish. But 90% of the time, I'm going to be in Python for sure.
Jake, Brandon, final questions for Dave. Closing thoughts.
One question. Why isn't sumo real?
That's such a debate. Sumo is real. Sumo is real.
Know. I love sumo too. It's okay.
Sumo's my favorite. Well, so for tall guys, sumo is the most important because it doesn't destroy your back, right? But
for anybody who the uninitiated, deadlifting, big thing about sumo versus natural.
Yeah, so natural deadlifts, you have more closer feet, and you're kind of lifting from the sides. Whereas sumo, you have sumo stance like a sumo wrestler, and there's a big debate in the meathead industry, which one's the real one, right? Sumo's fine.
It's regular. Now, Dave, let's just call it what it is and Band-Aid off, right? Sumo isn't real. I'm gonna say it right now, sumo's not real. Come at me on my private. I do not speak for Trimark Security. Trimark Security holds no official opinion about sumo versus natural.
Any chance we could talk about Danny after this, by any chance?
Absolutely, Dave. We'll have a drink and Zoom at some point for sure.
So can you put in the corporate policy that sumo is real?
Trimark holds no official position about sumo versus lots of good people on both sides. Anyway, Brandon, any closing thoughts?
I don't have any questions for Dave, but you did an awesome job. It's a pleasure to just be on stream with you, and I strive to be able to pee next to you someday.
That's perfect. Don't say anything else.
I'll pee next to you anytime, Brandon.
That was the perfect closing line. And when I edit this out, that's the last thing people on the podcast on Spotify are going to hear. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Hacking Dave Kennedy. Check out Binary Defense and TrustedSec.com. Sean Metcalf, CTO, founder, CEO of Trimark Security, our generous benefactors for this podcast. Bad code ... horse. Jake Hildreth, and of course at Tech Brandon. Visit looking for an assessment. We have Active Directory, we have Azure AD, we have Purple Team, which is resistance against ransomware, and we have our Azure AD and ESXi assessments. Check them out on trimarksecurity.com/services. For those of you listening on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, thank you. I didn't know if anybody would, but you're definitely listening to it, so we appreciate it. Next Friday, 2 p.m., probably episode 3 of Hacking Demystified, if I have my way. Again, Dave, thank you for taking the time, man.
Thanks,
Thank
Dave.
you all so much for having me. Always a pleasure. Always good seeing you guys. Yeah, thank you so much. I love Trimark.
Thanks, Dave. Love you. And I assume we're out.
No, we're still doing hot mics, but hey, why not? This is normally the time of the show. This is my favorite, where I forget to tell my guests. Now I'm playing music as it has a nice ending screen, and people talk anyway. So I don't know why I bother doing this, but people are hearing it right now.
That's fine.
Hot mic for all.
Better this way.
Yeah, you don't like Pumpkin Spice and sumo and all that.
Yeah, sumo isn't real. TrimarkSecurity.com.